Hello again, my name's Gabe Zolna. One of my viewers sent me a rather interesting little email. This was written by Frank Schaeffer, that's S-C-H-A-E-F-F-E-R of the Washington Post. I hope you take the time to listen and then share it with your like-minded friends. Before my son became a Marine, I never thought much about who was defending me. Now when I read of the war on terrorism or the coming conflict in Iraq, it cuts to my heart. When I see a picture of a member of our military who has been killed, I read his or her name very carefully. Sometimes I cry. In 1999, when the barrel-chested Marine recruiter showed up in dress blues and bedazzled my son John, I did not stand in the way. John was headstrong, and he seemed to understand these stern, clean men with straight backs and flawless uniforms. I did not. I live in the Volvo-driving, higher education, worshiping North Shore of Boston. I write novels for a living. I have never served in the military. It had been hard enough sending my two older children off to Georgetown and New York University. John's enlisting was unexpected, so deeply unsettling. I did not relish the prospect of answering the question, quote, "So where is John going to college?" question mark, end of quote, from the parents who were itching to tell me all about how their son or daughter was going to Harvard. At the private high school John attended, no other students were going into the military. Quote, "But aren't the Marines terribly Southern?" question mark, end of quote, says a lot about open-mindedness in the Northeast, asked one perplexed mother while standing next to me at the brunch following graduation. Quote, "What a waste. He was such a good student," end of quote, said another parent. One parent, a professor at a nearby and rather famous university, spoke up at a school meeting and suggested that the school should, quote, "carefully evaluate what went wrong," end of quote. When John graduated from 3 months of boot camp on Parris Island, 3,000 parents and friends were on the parade decks. We parents in our Marines did not only they're of many races, but also were representative of many economic classes. Many were poor. Some arrived crammed in the back of pickup trucks, others by bus. John told me that a lot of parents could not afford the trip. We in the audience were white and Native American. We were Hispanic, Arab, and African American, and Asian. We were former Marines wearing the scars of battle, or at least baseball caps embossed with battle names. We were Southern whites from Nashville and skinheads from New Jersey, black kids from Cleveland wearing ghetto rags, and white ex-cons with ham hocks, forearms defaced by jailhouse tattoos. We would not have been mistaken for the educated and well-heeled parents gathered on the lawns of John's private school a half year before. After graduation, one new Marine told John, quote, "Before I was a Marine, if I had ever seen you on the block, I would have probably killed you just because you were standing there," end of quote. This was a serious statement from one of John's good friends, a black ex-gang member from Detroit, who, as John said, quote, "would die for me now, just like I died for him." My son had connected me to my country in a way that I was too selfish and insular to experience before. I felt closer to the waitress at the local diner than to some of my oldest friends. She has 2 sons in the Corps. They are facing the same dangers as my boy. When the guy who fixes my car asks me how John is doing, I know he means it. His younger brother is in the Navy. Why were I and the other parents at my son's private school so surprised by his choice? During World War II, the sons and daughters of the most powerful and educated families did their bits. If the idea of the immortality of the Vietnam War was the only reason those lucky enough to go to college dodged the draft, why did we not encourage our children to volunteer for military service once that war was done? Have we wealthy and educated Americans all become pacifists? Is the world a safer place? Or have we just gotten used to having somebody else defend us? What is the future of our democracy when the sons and daughters of janitors in our elite universities are far more likely to be put in harm's way than are any of the students whose dorms their parents clean? I feel shame because it took my son joining the Marine Corps to make me take notice of who was defending me. I feel hope because perhaps my son is part of the future greatest generation. As the storm clouds of war gather, at least I know that I can look the men and women in uniform in the eye. My son is one of them. Here is the best I have to offer. Here is my heart. Quote, faith is not about everything turning out okay. Faith is about being okay no matter how things turn out. God bless America. Please pray for our military. Every American needs to read this, or in this case, hear this. Pass it on. Folks, you know, I almost cried when I first read this. You know why? I'll tell you why. You folks probably have no reason to know this. Some of my friends do know this. I taught my son to fly when he was 9. He started flying with me, his dad. When he was 14, I had him take flying lessons. We were Canadians. The Air Force tried to recruit my son out of high school. He was lettered, track and field. He was intelligent, an excellent student. And then we found out that they don't allow Canadians into the Air Force Academy. Well, since I had physical custody, I naturalized him, and I became an American citizen. We had an appointment to naturalize my son down in Los Angeles. The woman said, "Oh, I see you have the divorce decree, very good," which showed I had physical custody. "Oh, I see you have birth certificate, very good. We need one more document." "What do we need?" "We need a marriage certificate." I said, "How could I have been divorced from the woman on the birth certificate if I wasn't married?" I asked to speak to her supervisor. He came in, and I explained the situation. I said, "I've got to get this thing done, otherwise my son can't go to the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs." I said, "I'll have the documents here tomorrow. I'll contact Ottawa, they'll be here tomorrow." He looked at me and he said, "Mr. Zolna, we don't do curb service." Well, my son wasn't interested in taking a year off. So he said, "Dad, can I go to SMU?" I didn't even know what SMU was. I said, "Sure, you can go to SMU." Well, SMU is Southern Methodist University. That's where George W. Bush went. It's a private university. Well, I said he could go, and he went. I paid for it. The last 2 years at the university, he joined ROTC. And when he joined the Air Force, he was sent to Columbus, Mississippi. And when he graduated as a Air Force military pilot, he graduated with what they call their Top Gun Award. He had the best overall control of a T-38. And they take their best students and they make them instructors. So my son became what's known as a FAPE, a pilot instructor, and he taught for 3 years in Mississippi. Then he asked for an F-16, and he went to Luke Air Force Base in Arizona for a year. And then he was shipped off to Misawa, Japan. In the last couple of months of his tour in Japan, prior to that, he did 2 tours. He did a combat tour, and then he did a tour in Korea. So he was gone about 11 months from his wife at that time. They didn't have any children. He then was flying his F-16 from Misawa, Japan to Alaska for war games. And in Alaska, they met the B-2 bomber pilots. They were having a couple of cocktails in the evening, and the B-2 pilots were telling him how much they liked flying the B-2. Fighter pilots like the G's, they like the action, they like the speed. And my son said, why? And they said, the B-2 never leaves. It takes off from Whiteman Air Force Base. It'll do a 35-hour mission and it comes back. So they're always home with their families. And if they want a hot rod, they have access to a T-38 whenever they wish to fly it. My son, being the hot pilot that he is, asked to become a B-2 aircraft commander. And he became a B-2 aircraft commander, and then he became a B-2 aircraft commander instructor because he had taught before. And then he decided that he wanted to go into private industry. He now flies as a first officer for Delta, and he also flies as a major in the Air Force Reserve. So folks, you see, I can relate to what this gentleman wrote about his son. He's proud of his son, as I'm proud of my son. And all you folks who have sons and daughters that serve, you should all be proud, as we are. I also am proud of my daughters. I have 3 daughters. They never served, but they serve in other ways. They serve their husbands, they serve their families, they serve their communities. They're all great children. And for the most part, I raised them by myself. Thanks for listening. I hope you share this with your like-minded friends. I hope you enjoy hearing what I read and what I told you as much as I enjoyed reading what I read and what I told you. Thanks for listening.